I want to introduce first Sarafina Nance. She was chosen as one of Forbes' 30 most inspirational women, but she's also an astrophysicist, an analog astronaut, a science communicator, an author, and a women's health advocate. You might have seen her work on the BBC, NPR, National Geographic, and today she's here to talk about her wonderful book, Little Leonardo's Fascinating World of Astronomy. So, Sarafina, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you here. Let's start with this before we discuss your book. You're an astrophysicist and an analog astronaut. That is so cool. Have you have you always loved space? Have you always loved science? How did you get interested?
Yeah, I have loved astronomy since I was a little kid. I used to stargaze with my dad all the time. I would listen to Stardate radio with my mom. And I was just enchanted from a very, very young age with the night sky. And I basically devoted myself to that starting at age 4, and it never went away.
Wow, you started at 4. You already knew.
Yeah,
That's
one track
incredible.
mind.
Well, today you're talking about the fascinating world of astronomy. And you, in this book, you explain the universe so beautifully. I wish I had this when I took college astronomy. I think it would have helped me probably.
Right, thank you.
But let me ask my first question. In your book, you talk about how stars are alive. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So it's interesting because stars live, they're birthed, they live, and then they die, just like humans, just like things here on Earth. Basically, their formation, they're birthed in a stellar nursery with a bunch of other stars. And then once nuclear fusion ignites within their core, they start living. They go throughout their life cycle, they get bigger, then they get smaller, and then ultimately they stop fusing, which is when they die. Um, and so stars, they're really interesting for a lot of reasons, which I talk about in the book. But one of them is that they are literally the places where life is formed in our universe. All of the elements that make up life here on Earth are formed in the cores of stars. And so there's this really interesting relationship between, they have their own life cycles, but they're also responsible for life as we know it.
Well, your book so beautifully describes that, but it also had a part I love, which was dark matter and dark energy. That sounds scary. Tell us about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I remember when I first learned that we only know 4 to 5% of everything in the universe, and everything else is something we don't understand, and that things are dark energy and dark matter. So dark energy is the force that basically makes the universe expand and expand and expand, and then dark matter is this invisible matter that we can't see but we know exists. And so talking about that was really cool because I remember learning about that as a teenager and I was like, why didn't I know about this? We only know so little. And I that's why I included it.
Well, like you, I love looking up at the night sky. I'm enchanted by it, even here when it's sometimes obscured by clouds. Um, but your book talks about how all of these other planets have more than one moon. We only have one moon that we can see, and there are so many more moons around so many other planets. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, so one of the really interesting parts of science that's kind of going on right now is looking for these exomoons. So they're moons on other worlds outside of our solar system. And so these moons can actually be like other habitable places in our universe. And so we can look to moons to actually find future planets for us to live on potentially, or even search for life outside of our solar system. So moons are just as exciting, I think, as planets.
Serafina, do they discover the moons like visually, or do they discover them with math? Like, how do they discover and find moons on other planets?
Yeah, it's done a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's visual, but you can imagine it's very, very small, right? Moons are tiny. And so you have to do some really clever math and physics to be able to find them. You have to build really impressive detectors to be able to search the sky for long enough and deep enough to be able to find, a needle in a haystack.
Well, Serafina, the end of your book has a list of your favorite astronomers. Who's
Yeah.
your all-time favorite astronomer? Who do you love the most?
Yeah, I think my favorite astronomer is actually not listed, and it's Carl Sagan. I love Carl Sagan for a lot of reasons, but most of all because he really is able to communicate, the magic of our universe with people and make it, seem so accessible and really so beautiful. And so I take a lot of inspiration from him as a person and also just as a communicator.
I agree. I love him too.
Yeah.
Well, what can our friends watching today do to discover more about the universe, more about the night sky, more about what's out there that we don't even know?
I think the first step is literally walking outside at night, obviously with your parents, and looking up at the night sky and being able to, just look up at the stars and start asking questions. There are lots of, these didn't exist when I was a kid, but there are lots of apps that you can download that will tell you what you're looking at.
Mhm.
That's really neat. You can look at planets, you can look at constellations, you can look at all sorts of things. And the wonderful thing about astronomy is that the night sky is really accessible. You don't need a telescope necessarily to see cool things. You can just walk outside and look up.
Mhm.
So that would be where I would start.
Serafina, I do that as well. So I have my phone. I point at the night sky, I push one button,
Yes.
it tells me that's Sirius or that's a planet. And
Yeah.
I'm always
Yeah.
wrong. Like I think it's
I
something
know.
else. And it's oh gosh, that's just a plane. So
Yes, yes, totally. Yeah, it's a good learning experience, right? You train yourself the more you use it, and then one day you'll know it's serious just by looking up.
oh, that's wonderful. Serafina, thank you so very, very much. We really appreciate you joining us today.